Honorable members, the first item on the order paper is a motion in the name of the Chief Whip of the Majority Party. May I recognize the Chief Whip?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, House Chair. House Chair, I move that the House, notwithstanding Rule 139, subsection 1, which deals with questions for oral reply in respect of the Deputy President, that this House means that replies in respect of oral questions that were due on the 20th of August 2020 be submitted by the Deputy President's office in writing as agreed upon in the National Programming Committee. I so move.
Thank you. The motion is that the proposal as the motion as raised by the Chief Whip be agreed to. Do we have any objections? The proposal as the motion. No objections, agreed to. Do we have the next item on the order paper is the statement by the Minister of Sports, Arts and Culture on transformation of the heritage landscape in South Africa. We now recognize the Honorable Minister Mthethwa, who is in the chamber. The Honorable Minister.
Thank you so much, Chair. Thanks, honorable members. I stand here before you today to address the matter that has received global attention. This is the matter of statues, symbols, place names, and other manner of symbolism that commemorate, celebrate, and venerate historical figures who are associated with slavery, imperialism, colonialism, and apartheid. These are not innocent architectural pieces, but are meant to communicate in a symbolic interactionism with the public. These symbols communicate such concepts as martyrdom, bravery, heroism, resilience, excellence, pride of nations, amongst others. The Ready to Govern document of the governing party in 1992, which became a guiding light to the new dispensation, stated the following, and I quote, "The monopoly over public symbols and names should give way to a diverse range representative of our whole population. Arts and culture are not the property of any one political party or group." These ideas made their way to the founding documents of the new dispensation, the Constitution of 1993, Constitution adopted in 96, which led to the promulgation of a number of acts, amongst others, the South African Geographic Names Council Act and the National Heritage Resources Act. A range of initiatives have emerged, such as renaming of major national landmarks, such as towns, cities, rivers, dams, international airports, as well as the declaration of several previously marginalized heritage, resistance and liberation sites as national heritage sites, with some elevated to World Heritage. Some iconic heritage sites worth billions of rands have also been added to our heritage landscape. These include, though not limited to, the Steve Biko Center in Ginsberg, Lily's Leaf in Rivonia, Nelson Mandela Museum in Umtata, Ngome Museum and Luthuli Museums in KZN, Freedom Park in Tshwane, and so on. These add to other natural heritage sites developed across the country, with some elevated to World Heritage status, like the Robben Island. In some instances, where national government has the authority and provincial governments are willing, we have relocated statues that evoke our colonial and apartheid past. These include the relocation of the bust of JP or Barry Herzog to a lesser prominent spot at the Union Buildings for Wood statues in Parliament here in Cape Town, and Free State, and many others. One of those is an imposing bust of Paul Kruger from the entrance of Kruger Park, relocated and taken to a less imposing and less prominent position for preservation. With all the above achievements, a South African formerly oppressed majority is still a cultural minority, as apartheid and colonial symbols and heritage still dominate our landscape, hence periodic protests agitating more rapid changes. Some of the geographical placement changes have been successfully challenged in courts due to procedural flaws, a reminder that any action in a revolution will be countered with reaction. Also important to note is that as a constitutional democracy, we have had to embark on extensive and nationwide consultation, which was painstakingly slow, but has to be followed to avoid court challenges. The question that the honorable members will then ask is why we still have colonial and apartheid status in our public spaces. Honorable members will appreciate the fact that the national and provincial governments are not custodians of most of these statues. Most of these statues are under the custodianship of municipal authorities. For a statue to be considered for repositioning or relocation, a public consultative process should be undertaken at the local government level. An application is to be lodged with the relevant provincial heritage resources authority, who will consider the application and take a decision on granting the permit after the required public consultation. If a statue is on a property declared as a national heritage site, the responsible provincial heritage resources authority will submit the application to the South African Heritage Resources Agency, who will consider the application and take a decision on granting the permit after the required public consultation. The department is not in a position to engage in the relocation of colonial and apartheid statues, as the minister is the executive authority for the South African Heritage Resources Agency, who will take the decision on the application for the relocation of a statue or symbol which is not in consonant with the constitutional values. If an appeal arises against the decision of South African for the relocation of a statue or symbol, the minister is the appeals authority who will appoint a tribunal to consider such an appeal and make a recommendation to the minister. We can therefore only make a point in the House that honorable members can raise the matter with municipalities, that the discussions on statues, street names, and other symbols that celebrate colonial figures be discussed as a matter of urgency. It is important to discuss that and converse as a nation. The department had previously led a number of consultative processes, and this led to the appointment of the Ministerial Task Team to look at this matter and how it's implemented.
Proceed.
The task team then coordinated
Honorable Zungu, from the virtual platform, you disturbing the proceedings. Please mute your mic.
Resolutions were taken here, which was clustered into 4 clusters. The first one was on public education awareness and mobilization, because we've understood that there is a lack of understanding on the processes of the changes. The second one was the strengthening of the legislation. The third one was about the institutional capacity. The fourth one was on the fate, the future of the heritage landscape. This cluster recommended that an audit of offensive statues, names, symbols, and monuments be conducted, and likewise advise the department to develop a framework which will provide guidance on the relocation of statues that are inimical to the Constitution and the founding values of the new democratic order. A cluster allocated for the development of a theme park or theme parks, which will be cultural spaces hosting the relocated statues or memorials. The theme for the theme parks would be for the protagonists of colonialism and apartheid. The cluster further advised that the relocation of these statues, memorials, should be conducted in a prescribed and systematic manner. The concept of relocation and not demolition of these statues is embedded in the National Heritage Resources Act of 1999, which states, and I quote, "Public monuments and memorials have cultural significance or special value and are therefore considered to be part of the national estate." This is important in sharpening memory as a potent tool in humanity's struggles against forgetting. It also assists to preserve different conjunctures of society. It is therefore in this context that the department maintains the view that heritage must be inclusive and speak to the shared identities of all South Africans, whilst also celebrating the unique and significant values of our diverse range of cultural groups. The department, through its agency, SARA, is currently developing regulations and framework to this effect. These theme parks would be happening also, taking place in provinces, so that we are able to preserve them, because we decided that they should be preserved. They should not be thrown into the dustbin of history. Our own experience shows us that if you opt for that route of dumping them, people are going to demand them. Russia is an example. When Lenin and Marx and all those leaders were taken away to what is called the Museum of Shame, people the world over demanded to see these people. That is why the tourist industry in Russia today is one of those which has progressed very much. The department wishes to explore this thought of repositioning and relocating these statues, however, in a structured manner where they will be exhibited and curated under the theme of an old adage, lest we forget. This will ensure that posterity will understand the trials and tribulations that our nation has undergone. Honorable members, all of us should assist with starting debates and discussions within our constituencies and communities so that as a nation, we can transform our heritage landscape. We also, on our part, will ensure that we crisscross the country and engage particularly the legislatures so that all and sundry in our country understand the laws governing this aspect, and we respond to the call to accelerate the transformation of the heritage landscape. Thank you very much, Chair.
Sure. The first member to respond to the statement is Honorable Van Dijk from the GA. Honorable Van Dijk.
House Chair, I've been alerted by the online platform, our staff as well as my team, that the Honourable Van Dijk, because of the load shedding, was kicked off and is coming back in. I wonder if you could allow the next speaker on the line, and then as soon as the Honourable Van Dijk is online, I'll let you.
Natasha,
thank you.
Ja. Voorzitter en leden van die huis. Sorry. Can I start?
I was saying proceed, ma'am. Thank you.
Agbare voorsitter en lede van die huis. September maande vier ons erfenis sowel as toerisme maand in Suid-Afrika. Ons verenig die regering, besighede, gemeenskaplede, kulturele organisasies, die toerismebedryf en ons tradisionele leierskap ten einde ons land se unieke ryk kultuurgeskiedenis tentoon te stel en te vier. In Erfenismaand gaan dit beslis nie net oor wat ons op 24 September oor die kolle gaan gooi nie, maar moet ons veral dink aan die erfenis wat ons vir ons toekomstige generasies wil bou en deurgee. Ons erfenis raak deel van wie ons is en reflekteer ons waardes en prioriteite. Hoe ons optree as individue bepaal die toekoms van ons land. Daarom is dit belangrik dat ons bou aan 'n nie-rassige, nie-seksistiese, demokratiese en verenigde Suid-Afrika waar alle inwoners vry en gelyk is. Ons moet ons diverse kulture omarm. The 1996 White Paper on Arts, Culture and Heritage was revised to accelerate transformation. This process has eventually taken Minister Mthethwa more than 5 years to complete. The RWP talks of developing a coherent and integrated system, but it is because of the lack of this that much of the 1996 White Paper's recommendations remain unfulfilled, reflecting on the vision, capacity and leadership ability of the DAC. Versoening beteken nie ons moet almal ons diversiteit en identiteit prysgee nie. Ook nie dat ons moet verskoning vra vir ons ras, taal of kultuur nie. Daarom dat Panjasa Lesofie Gauteng LER vir onderwys se Haat vir Afrikaans verwerp moet word. Ook die Nasionale Museum van Bloemfontein se uitvoerende hoof, mevrou Snell, se stappe om beide inheemse tale Afrikaans en Sotho met die meerderheid sprekers in die Vrystaat intentioneel uit die wetenskaptydskrif die Kulna te verwyder. What must happen is that we should have these conversations in indigenous languages, a decolonizing practice in itself. Probleme rondom die vestiging van inheemse tale in Suid-Afrika spruit uit die onvermoë van die Pan-Suid-Afrikaanse Taalraad om al werk na behoore te doen in die Talewet van 2012 wat deur die regering goedgekeur is te implementeer. Dis steeds nie in werking by die meeste staatsdepartemente nie. Dit gaan hier ook oor die miskenning van minderheidsgroepe deur die regering in terme van die erkenning van taal- en kultuurregte en weer eens hoofsaaklik gebrekkige implementering en gepaardgaande monitering. Die feit dat die Khoisan as eerste inheemse volk meer as 20 jaar moes wag vir wetgewing, die tradisionele en Khoisan leierskapwet van 2018, om hulle in te sluit as deel van die tradisionele huise, sluit aan by die miskenning van kulturele groepe. Minister Mthethwa at Freedom Park in 2018 on the report on transformation of the heritage landscape said, and I quote, "A nation which does not know and honor its past is like a tree without roots," unquote. Your disrespect for other cultures, their freedom of choice and association, as well as religious beliefs, unfortunately became apparent when you decided, like a true dictator, that sport players should be investigated for not bending the knee for your political, ideological beliefs. It's completely unconstitutional. Where the 1996 White Paper affirmed the transparent appointment of structures governing the arts, today, the chairpersons are appointed by the minister, giving the ruling party a direct channel into publicly funded institutions. This reflects how far our society and the governance of the arts and culture sector have moved from the founding principles of transparency and participatory democracy contained in the 1996 White Paper. If we speak of reconciliation and social cohesion, we also need to address the legacy the ANC government is creating for future generations. Minister Mthethwa, you previously served as Minister for Safety and Security. What have you and the ANC done towards reconciliation after the Marikana massacre where 34 illegal miners were killed? Having studied at the Rhodes University, it is interesting that you commended the Rhodes Must Fall movement for creating a new call for the acceleration of transformation, knowing that removing and defacing of colonial monuments in a so-called effort to reclaim the present by erasing the past is unlawful. Maybe this attitude also explains why the responses on written questions by the department on the sanitizing or decolonizing of the history in the National Museum Bloemfontein by the CEO were of such a poor standard. To have a person with no academic qualifications in history sanitize history as intended by the CEO is an attack on academic freedom. Nelson Mandela, wat in 2018 vereer is by Freedom Park, kulturele monument wat vryheidsstryders vereer en vir meer as 1 miljard gebou is, het 'n visie gehad vir rekonsiliasie in Suid-Afrika, die uitbou van 'n reënboognasie. My oorsigbesoek daar het gewys dat hierdie erfenispark uitmekaar val as gevolg van swak instandhouding. Minister, to not merely tick the right boxes, but to truly reclaim the past and honor the contribution made in service of humanity, the heritage parks and sites needs to be maintained. Our heritage landscape is barren, caused by a government dividing us, speaking of our people and excluding the rest who are not black enough. Building towards a collective rainbow nation is not the ANC vision anymore. The policy recommendations from the 53rd National Conference that declared 2013 to 2023 the decade of the cadre in order to safeguard the values of the ANC confirms this. It's sad that it does not wish to safeguard the values of the country. or all South Africans. Our people only creates the illusion of inclusion. Landsburgers word verder verdeel as gevolg van die ekonomie wat in die moeilikheid is. Today, we have a more unequal society than in 1994, with unemployment levels higher than ever. In this regard, we must not only pay attention to injustices and imbalances of the past, but also the factors that have contributed to greater injustices and imbalances of the last 26 years. Macroeconomic policies, poor service delivery, high levels of corruption, crime, cadre deployment, non-profit state-owned entities, and lack of accountability. The ANC's BBBEE model is clearly not working. Dr. Anne Luttrich from the DA reflected that, and I quote, the value of a just and caring society, creating opportunities for participation where people are given choices about how they live and where they have the means to make those choices and perceive themselves as active participants rather than passive beneficiaries, unquote, should be endorsed. Not party, political, and family connections, but merit should be the key to get access to opportunities. The arts and creative products propagate ideas, values, and ways of seeing the world. It can reinforce how important culture is in changing behavior. In the first week of the lockdown, there were 87,000 reports of domestic violence to the police, emphasizing the need to address the culture that enables this violence. It is tragic that the 5 billion in COVID-19 tenders under investigation for corruption exceeds the budget allocation for the departments of art and culture. The relief funding allocated to artists, eventually standing at an apparent 250 million, with less than 17 million paid out to date, is a disgrace. The DA calls for an external audit. Die departement verwag intussen skaamteloos van kunstenaars om met 2200 per maand te oorleef, minder as die ANC se voorgestelde minimumloonbedrag vir mense om maandeliks te kan oorleef. As it is, there is no new born in the arts and culture sector. The sun is setting with government clearly out of touch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The Honorable Madlingozi.
Thank you, Chairperson. We all need to be honest and ask ourselves, what is national heritage when in South Africa, a country still defined by the evils of colonialism and apartheid? One of our key ideological guides, Frantz Fanon, once argued, quote, a national culture is the whole body of efforts made by a people in the sphere of thought to describe, justify, and trace the action through which that people has created itself and keeps itself in existence, unquote. In the context of South Africa, what is our national culture? What heritage are we celebrating? On whose terms? In front of the very parliament we are members of, there is an imposing statue of Louis Botha, a hero of the Dutch settlers who still believe that they were called by God to dominate and kill black people as and when they wished. He represents the heritage of the people who maimed and killed black people. Is he also part of the heritage we should be celebrating as a nation? In Parliament, still, there is also an imposing statue of Queen Victoria, under whose leadership and guidance our country's resources were looted, our people killed, and our country annexed. Is she also part of the heritage that we should be celebrating? In our history, there are deeds and heroic proportions done by men and women whose names and deeds have been eroded from our memory. Who remembers the historic deeds of Chief Makoma and the brutal manner he was killed in Robben Island? Who remembers the heroic battles fought by King Sekhukhune in his struggle to fend off the annexation of our land? Who remembers Bambata? Heroic African men and women who sought to affirm their status as humans were erased from history. African advances, cultures, laws, societal relations, and religions were completely decimated in the name of civilization. We have assimilated to foreign cultures and are celebrating foreign heritage, which was forced down our throats by the barrel of the gun. The result of this process is deculturalization. As Steve Biko would say, quote, the black man is no longer a man, but a shell, unquote. So a question must be asked. Has the past 26 years of democracy allowed for black person to affirm and claim back his right as a full human being in the company of other beings? Has the post-1994 establishment enabled the process through which black people would remain their dispossessed beings and all that the dispossession entails? We sing this stem in our national anthem, a war song sung by the Dutch settlers as they killed our people. We have thousands of statues around the country celebrating the roles played by murderous Dutch and British settlers in this country. We have towns and cities still named after those who murdered our grandparents. Our languages have not been developed to the extent they should have, because even 26 years after the attainment of freedom, the languages of the British and Dutch settlers are still given preference. Our intellectual forebears, such as Elijah Makiwane, Pambani Mzimba, John Tengo, Jababu, Walter Khubusana, Tio Shoka, Bessie Head, Miriam Platt, Solomon Platt, pigs thrown into the dustbins of history, while our children are forced to imbibe written rubbish by whites which seeks to sanitize our history. You therefore speak about the transformation of the heritage landscape without all these issues, Minister. We need
Just a minute, please. The Honorable Merida was the point of order.
Honourable Chairperson, I would like to know if the Honourable Member is prepared to take an easy question.
Honorable Ngozi, are you ready to take a question?
I'm not prepared to do that.
So why are you speaking English?
Honorable Member, please. Continue, Honorable Ngozi.
Thank you, Chair. We need to be unashamed in affirming our Africanness in every aspect of our lives, in the literary field, in sports, in arts, and in the framing of national discourse. This can't happen if we continue led by those who suck up to whiteness. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Members, can we just make sure that there is translation for the members in the House? I don't know how it's done. It's very important that we have that. It started last week, we didn't have it on Tuesday. Please, let's resolve that matter as we continue. We can't stop members because it's not their doing. The Honorable Tabekulu.
Thank you, Chairperson. All members, transforming our heritage landscape in line with them has been a collaborative work in progress since the dawn of our new democracy or democratic dispensation in 1994. The fact is that we are one rainbow nation with a kaleidoscope of cultures which must all coexist in harmony. Reconciliation and nation building must therefore be at the forefront of such a transformation. It is in this vein that we condemn the defacing of any statue by certain radical segments or groups of the population. Statues and monuments should be embraced and protected by all citizens, irrespective of creed or cultural background. Removal of statues must be done within the parameters of the law and after due consideration by government in consultation with interested members of the public. That being said, we agree that there is still much controversy around certain statues and monuments that reflect the oppression of the past and that still threaten to undermine and tear at the social fabric we are trying so hard to knit together as a nation. Many colonial statues do not resonate with the narrative of the new democratic South Africa we are trying to so hard to build, but rather invoke sentiments of past racism and oppression. A common heritage and culture are therefore required, and as our constitutional requirement requires of us all, only through deliberative effort will South Africa become a just and equal society. South Africans would also do well to remember that the preamble of our constitution clearly states that South Africa belongs to all who live in it. Unquote. United in our diversity. Let us therefore find ways to unite as South Africans. Let us rally around our nation's symbols, in particular, our national flag. Let us continue to forge a new shared heritage as we proudly display our national flag both here and at home and also across the globe. moments such as the victory of the Springboks at the 2019 Rugby World Cup saw South Africans of all ages, races, and background coming together, united in our diversity. This victory now forms part of our collective heritage as South Africans. As our country battles against the scourge of COVID-19, let us consider that this too, our response to this devastating pandemic, will form part of our country's shared heritage. Let the, sorry. Just a, sorry. Let us therefore find ways to unite as South Africans. Let us rally around our national symbols, in particular our national flag, as I've just said. South Africans of all ages, races, and background coming together, united in our diversity. As our country battles against the COVID-19, let us consider that this too, our response to this devastating pandemic, will form part of our country's shared heritage. Let the stories told to future generations of South Africans, of South Africa's efforts to battle and eventually defeat the coronavirus speak of a country where citizens stood together and made a positive difference in the lives of their fellow South Africans. I thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was it. Dana.
Thank you, House Chair. Honourable House Chair, a heritage landscape is defined as a geographical area, in this case South Africa, that has been modified by human activity and therefore has cultural and or heritage value for communities. I do not have to relay any of the human activity that has modified the heritage landscape of South Africa. We all know it, the good and the bad, albeit different versions of it anyway. The fact remains, however, that human activity did occur, and it shaped the heritage and cultural landscape of one of the most beautiful countries in the world. That human activity did not start and end with apartheid. It started hundreds, even thousands of years ago, and it cannot be wiped from history as if it did not even exist or contribute to the cultural heritage we have in South Africa today. I, for instance, am an Afrikaner with a rich and cultural heritage of which I am extremely proud. And whether the EFF likes it or not, or even agree with it, I'm also an African and a South African who is proud of my beautiful country. It therefore goes without saying, I'm going nowhere. That is my cultural heritage. I noted the question of Honourable Madlingozi, who spoke before me on a recent question paper about the number of so-called colonial and apartheid statues in the country and the procedure to remove these statues, a question which the Minister has subsequently proceeded to answer here today. Though one might wonder what qualifies as colonial or apartheid statues, according to the EFF and the ANC, it's not difficult to derive that this is probably a renewed onslaught on any and all Afrikaner-related statues and heritage sites as well. Die standbeeld is uiters kommerwekkend en arrogant. Geskiedenis, goed en sleg, is belangrik. Ons moet weet en onthou wat in die verlede gebeur het, sodat ons kan leer en bou aan 'n beter toekoms. Die geskiedenis van die volke en gemeenskappe van Suid-Afrika kan nie bloot uitgewis word of selfs na 'n obskure hoekie toe geskuif word, omdat dit nie inpas by die politieke ideologie van sekere partye nie. Voor die Britse parlement staan 'n groot standbeeld van Oliver Cromwell, die man wat koning Charles I onthoof het, 'n republiek uitgeroep het en op 'n tydstip selfs die parlement ontbind het. Reg oorkant sy standbeeld, die borsbeeld van die einste koning Charles wie onthoof is. Beide is daar, want dit is deel van die menslike aktiwiteit, die geskiedenis wat aanleiding gegee het tot die toedrag van sake vandag. Voeg standbeelde by. Sit 'n standbeeld van Bronfischer langs die van NT Steyn voor die IFE se hoofgebou. Hou die standbeeld van generaal Louis Botha voor Mandela hier voor die nasionale vergadering preek. Transform the heritage landscape by adding to it. Louis Botha, by the way, was a freedom fighter, Honourable Madlingozi, who fought against British colonial rule. After the Bambata Rebellion, the king of the Zulu nation was jailed by British authorities in 1908. 2 years later, General Louis Botha, a friend of the Zulu king, became Prime Minister of the Union of South Africa. And one of the first things he did, Honourable Minister, was to order the release of Denis Zulu, and I quote the Honorable Buthelezi on this matter: "We cannot just wipe away part of our history, because then our history becomes truncated. We need the whole picture. We need the whole picture." En dit is nie net van toepassing op standbeelde nie. Dit hou ook verband met taal en kultuurerfenis oor die algemeen. The villainizing of the Afrikaans language has to stop. I was interrupted during my maiden speech here in the 6th Parliament by an EFF member who called my mother tongue and the mother tongue of millions of South Africans in this country a despicable language. Statements such as these should not be tolerated in a country where our languages and cultural heritage are protected by a constitution.
You love EFF. Your whole speech is just EFF.
Different communities of South Africa be respected, Honourable from the EFF, promoted to those that holds it dear. And yes, Minister, I'd like to quote you, lest we forget. Thank you, Madam Chair.
The government in waiting, EFF.
Where, Eloise?
Honorable Litsie, Honorable Ntlangwini, Honorable Sonti, consider this your yellow card. You interrupt the speaker again. I'm going to ask the IT to remove you from the system. That is a warning. We now call on the Honorable Thring.
Honorable House Chair, the African Christian Democratic Party, and I believe South Africans in general, honor those who gave themselves willingly and sacrificially so that South Africa could indeed belong to all who live in it, irrespective of race, religion, ethnicity, culture, tribe, or tongue. Without a doubt, we have a rich heritage. The truth be told, those who lay claim to struggle credentials, but abuse their privileged positions because they have connections to honorable leaders are not worth their salt, but bring shame and ridicule to the heritage that we have. Our heritage cannot and must not be used as a blank check to pillage, steal, and commit wanton acts of corruption and crime. To do this is to cheapen the memory of the true struggle stalwarts, the Govan Mbekis, Walter Albertina Sisulus, Nelson Mandela's, Archie Gomedi's, Virgil and Trevor Bonham's in the early 80s. It is these stalwarts and others like them who have given us the heritage that we now possess. Honorable Speaker, many communities in South Africa are broken, trust is lost, and crime is rampant, and many have lost hope. We need to move beyond talks about transformation of the heritage landscape in South Africa and live transformation, lest we denigrate or neglect the great heritage that we have. I wish to mention an organization that I've worked with over the last 7 to 8 years called CAST, or Churches Alliance for Social Transformation, an organization that works with all race groups and across all denominational lines. Their word works and resilience education programs rescues children who have fallen behind. Many of these children are now excelling after their intervention. Their sports programs takes young boys and girls off the streets and away from drugs. The entrepreneurship programs help to grow township and community businesses, and the poverty alleviation programs has fed hundreds of thousands of families over the years. All of this done without tenders, without corruption and fraud. The ACDP salutes CAST and the many thousands of Christian and other faith-based organizations who understand our heritage and who work tirelessly to bring about true transformation in our country, one community at a time. The removal of statues and other cultural edifices may produce a psychological advantage, but adds no real value to the lives of millions of South Africans who are unemployed and hungry. The ACDP believes in building a common heritage, an inclusive economy, with the plan and the heart to build a prosperous South Africa, understanding the rich heritage that we have in the greatest leader that ever lived, Christ Jesus. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Thring. I don't have a name for the UDM. Is there anyone on the platform to take the slot? None. The ATM, I also don't have a name. None. We now move to Honorable Sheikh Imam of the NFP.
Thank you, Honorable House Chair. Allow me to thank the Minister for his presentation and other colleagues. But let me draw the attention of this House and commend one Rivaj Ramdas, who came to the protection of the culture and heritage of the Muslims community at large in South Africa, whose call for prayer is a risk and a threat at this point in time. I commend him for his stance on calling for all of us to unite in ensuring that the call to prayer continues. But very importantly, he made a statement that maybe all of us should be calling for prayer 5 times a day, given the challenges we face in the world today. Honorable House Chair, I'm not sure why everything that we seem to want to debate in this House must have something to do with the race and color. Yes, indeed, we have been oppressed, but it is not true if we say only the white South Africans oppressed us. Many black South Africans also oppressed us. The struggle was fought and won between close collaboration between whites, blacks, Indians, coloreds, all races. They did not look at race. So I think we must stop using race to divide our community. In fact, I want to quote what Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, always said, no white is better than a black and no black is better than a white. Now, this is Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who has over 1.6 billion followers worldwide and growing, estimated by 2050 to be the largest religion in the world, in fact. Now, Honorable House Chair, when we talk about the issue of transformation in South Africa, particularly in terms of heritage, we must not forget the rightful heirs of this heritage that we are talking about. And I'm going to go back to the issue of the role that the Indian community played since they landed in South Africa, under what conditions, and their contribution to where we are today. But very importantly, I want to quote the case of the Khoi and the San community, the rightful heirs of the land of South Africa, the first indigenous people in this country, and the people who actually educated and guided and showed these trekkers that came into South Africa and the Afrikaners how to even find and discover water. So maybe there needs to be a link with water when you want to decide on the heritage and how you want to recognize, particularly the Khoi and San people. It is very sad today that the Khoi and San community have to almost beg for recognition. No other grouping in South Africa recognizes them or is willing to address the challenges of the Khoi and San. They have to go out there begging on their knees. Honorable House Chair, I want to say that the issue of the heritage and the statues and things must fall under the mandate and domain of national department. Because if you take particularly like in the case of the Khoi and San, predominantly in the Western Cape and Northern Cape, if they are not governed by a party that is going to welcome and accept that, it's going to be a problem. So I think
Sheikh Imam, your time has expired. Asimukeleni umhlonishwa uNtshayisa.
Thank you very much, Honorable House Chair. Just to give context to this debate, let me highlight our disturbing reading of the National Heritage Resources Act of 1999, for which I think the Minister will take notes. The preamble to this Heritage Act is as disappointing as the purpose of legislation, both of which are silent on the transformation of architecture and the management of the national estate. South African Heritage Resources authorities and other relevant bodies should have a renewed mandate to transform the management and coordination of heritage resources as we have previously proposed. Honorable Chair, whereas the Heritage Act states that our heritage celebrates our achievements and contributes to addressing the past inequities. There's nothing in the Act that suggests on how these past inequities will be addressed through transformative constitutionalism. The concept of transformative constitutionalism, for which Professor Carl here is credited, requires both private and public bodies to infuse transformative tools in their processes and institutional cultural practices. This principle was affirmed by Constitutional Court in Batusta Fishing Pty Ltd versus the Minister of Environmental Affairs and Tourism and the others. Honorable Chair, in this regard, transforming South Africa's heritage resources landscape, like the Robben Island, the Cradle of Humankind, the Mapungubwe Heritage Site, and the Fred de Fort Dome in Free State, among others, would require the infusion of principles set out in the Batusta fishing case. Honorable Chair, the Heritage Act recognizes that our heritage celebrates our achievements, and yet there are no transformation goals embedded in the Act in terms of how past inequities will be addressed. Even the National Heritage Council and agencies respectively only coordinate and promote the management of heritage resources at national. They have no legislative mandate to transform national monuments such as the Robben Island to ensure that they are curated by African managers and that the development of these monuments benefits African suppliers, local suppliers, and businesses with a view to transforming the heritage landscape. Honorable Chair, in this respect, we argue that our World Heritage sites such as the Cradle of Humankind, Ukashamba Drakensberg Park, the Mapungubwe National Park, and the Fred Point Dome, and many others must be underpinned by our transformation principles. These principles should also apply to other living heritage, such as cultural tradition, oral history, performance, ritual, and popular memory.
On that note, thank you very much.
The Minister to classify the Winnie Madikizela Mandela
No,
House.
it's red, Baba.
Thank you very much. What is this? Thank you very much.
It means you are beyond your time with the number there. I'm not going to call.
There is no hope. Although I'm here,
That's why because you should be here on where you are supposed to be. So it shows you're not participating in the debate. But I'm happy you are in the House. Honorable Nelson.
House Chairperson. An African is anyone whose roots cannot be traced beyond the borders of Africa. We will not inherit colonial conquest and systematic racism in Africa. We will not accept to be permanently located in poverty, hunger, squalor, and inequality in which the settler colonial conquerors live off the fat of the land, while the majority of the masses are homeless and landless. Cultural heritage is linked to political and economic conditions. Our heritage in the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania is the glorious struggles of the African people and their contribution towards civilization. Palaburua, Monomotapa, Mapungubwe, Ulundi, Lowe, and many other cities designed and made by the indigenous African people. The trade with the East, known as the Azanian civilization, we must venerate the illustrious contributions of the people. The Voltrekker Monument and the status of Boer leaders are now a painful sight in the towns and cities. They must go. Comrade Minister, heritage yethu yamoshakala ngo-1959 when the Freedom Cheetah said this country belongs to all who live in it. It is highly unfair and sectarian, Mr. Minister, for your department to erect statues of struggle heroes without considering A.P. Mda, Anton Limbede, Peter Raburoko, Sevania Mutupeng, David Sibeko, Vusmake, John Nyati Pogela, Umkayawako Chief Whip, Nomvo Boy, Maud Jackson, Fanny Desai, Sabelo Palmer, and many others whose footprint is undoubtedly on the landscapes of our national heritage. Our heritage of the land, the mountains, the flora and the fauna, the wildlife, the rivers, the sea, must be national and all-inclusive. It must be democratic and reflect the majority. It must make an immediate sense of belonging to the broad public. Our folklore must reflect ourselves in the school curriculum. We must have another Professor Kabim Goma to develop the national song. We encourage you, Mr. Minister, seriously engage with the African Music Academy concept that Kaifa Semenya and Letambuli have presented to your prejudiced cadre deployment workers, who are not ashamed to throw important ideas into file 13, rubbish bin. In fact, Africa's greatest contribution to civilization is the humanistic feature, umtu ngumtu gabantu, to the barbaric greed and evil we have learned from the rest of the Western world. Let us change and transform the landscapes and reflect the Azanian civilization. This country does not have a name. South is a direction. It is a mere geographic position. Azania must rise.
Stogos. Honorable Hendricks Aljama.
Thank you, Honorable Chair. Honorable Chair, there is a statuette of my great-grandfather, Haji Uzi Ali, amongst over 50 national heroes commissioned by the Oliver and Adelaide Foundation. This is an example of a heritage that is not known even by the ANC. So the Minister must be congratulated for his passion. The South African government has been mandated through legislation to construct a post-apartheid master narrative on the history, cultures and heritage of all South Africans, especially the communities who were deprived of their cultural heritage during apartheid. Legislation allowing the Azan to be banned by a participant court must be changed. Legislation must be changed to assist the Cape Malay Choir, who can no longer use the Good Hope Center for their practices and cultural activities. The Habibia Muslim Pipe Band can no longer have a parade from Bukap into the city, a tradition that they've been practicing for decades, and it will cost them thousands of money to get the permit. The Khoisan community is being deprived of a heritage site of their forefathers buried at Black River in Athlone. Their bones were all dug out and thrown into a canister. You don't do that, Honorable Chair. The remaining area of District 6 must remain barren as a heritage site. The vision of former President Thabo Mbeki, who wanted to launch the African nations from District 6, the hub of the resistance. The Parliament for the African Union must be on a site in District 6 where we had its first safe house. In the outspread 4 girls at Mahashi Secondary School, and a young learner, Azhar, was dismissed because of their culture and Islamic heritage beliefs. Today they have pleaded to Al Jamaat to assist them in going back to school to write their matric exams. Multiculturalism and social cohesion has been dealt a severe blow by our judiciary in the interpretation of labor law by effectively banning the spiritual strengthening sounds of church bells, the call to prayer, church singing, the sounds of bajans from the temples, the soothing sounds of the horn of Nabu Dawood. This banning of the Azan will leave behind a heritage worse than apartheid and encourages intolerance, selfishness, and arrogance. Honourable Minister, you have much work to do to prevent the 6th Parliament from betraying a heritage President Mandela has made much progress on and left behind. His own great-grandchildren will no longer be able to hear the Adhan and church bells. Remember his words, I am what I am because of who we all are. President Ramaphosa has much work to do and not opt out by talking judicial independence. Former President Zuma used to summon one of Al Jamaat councillors from Stanger to his homestead to recite the Adhan for him to get the comfort he needed from time to time. Lastly, Honourable Minister, Al Jamaat is not asking you to step down but to fix this rot. joint court action that prevents South Africa developing a proud heritage. The book-up is the book-up, and the Adhan is also now accepted. Thank you very much for your indulgence, Honorable Chair. Let me recite the first words of the Adhan, Allahu Akbar.
Thank you. Mhlomphehi Seabe, sebaka ke sa lena.
Thank you, Chair. In a speech delivered at a seminar held in Ottawa, Canada in February 1978, former President Mbeki argued that, I quote, all societies bear the imprint, the birthmarks of their own past, the imperative of their epoch, which has charged them with the task of transforming themselves from the status of objects of history to that of masters of history, close quote. Honorable members, the African National Congress used the 1994 democratic breakthrough as a benchmark to lay the foundation for a systematic transition from colonialism to a national democratic society. The immediate strategic priority was to rid the country of the remnants of apartheid and colonialism and launch the process of constructing a national democratic society. This immediate strategic priority became a foundation in the objective of building of a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and democratic South Africa, as proclaimed in key ANC documents, such as the Freedom Charter, Ready to Govern, and the Reconstruction and Development Program policy documents. These underpinned our Constitution, which is a strategic document in attaining the type of South Africa that we want. Building this South Africa cannot be achieved without the contribution of the heritage sector. The heritage sector plays a significant role in the promotion of nation building. Since the dawn of our democracy, the mandate of the ANC-led government was to transform the heritage landscape to reflect the people of South Africa in their diversity. Significant progress has been made in building a new and inclusive society to which the heritage sector has made a contribution. However, there is a need to accelerate, expand, and deepen this progress to address the new challenges which continue to emerge in society and within this sector. Despite this significant progress in the sector, the structural legacy of colonialism and apartheid remain deeply entrenched. This requires of us to continue with the project to transform this heritage landscape from its past dispensation to the one that reflects South Africa and the future South Africa, so to say. The ANC-led government continues to use arts, culture, and heritage as key sectors in the development of our country. Upon the receipt of our democracy, we created Legacy Project as one of the ways to address the transformation of our cultural and heritage landscape. The ending of apartheid meant that society had to be transformed to reflect the vision of a country that has received its democracy and is striving to progressively ensure that non-racialism, non-sexism, and unity prevails in a collective effort to ensure that the nation prospers. This transformation meant that the field of memory work, which includes memorials, monuments, and museums, would be affected. Transformation of our heritage landscapes form part of nation building, national healing, and recapturing of our lost history. Honorable members, transforming the colonial heritage landscape is one of the major challenges that currently confront our country. This is largely due to the resistance that this project has received from various coteries. This is precisely because we are progressively working towards redefining our nation, defining our identity, and building new monument and heritage sites. At the core of the resistance and debate about heritage is the contestation between the old and the new, those that supported the old apartheid regime and those who support the new and building a united, non-racial, non-sexist, and a prosperous South Africa. Cognizant that these two cultural groups have contributed in molding the character and identity of our country. The challenge is that the colonial and apartheid cultural landscape consistently and systematically tried to erase the heritage of Africans that existed prior to settlement. Honorable members, it was the ANC in its 1993 draft policy on arts, culture, and heritage for a post-apartheid South Africa that called for the preservation, revitalization, and the promotion of our national cultural heritage. It emphasized the significance of historical and cultural collections, resources, and sites should fully reflect the many components of our cultural heritage and should be accessible to all communities. In particular, effort must be made to conserve neglected and suppressed aspects of our people's culture. One of the strategic interventions identified as a priority in the draft policy was memorialization. The ANC-led government has always had a holistic approach to cultural heritage. It has always been underpinned by the view that memorials and monuments, including statues, must have meaning to the people. Existing memorials must foster reconstruction and reconciliation. Taking this into context, our country has over the past few years experienced a huge shift in its understanding of our collective or shared history. In the public arena, the discourse is on how the heritage landscape should be transformed. We are still confronted with the challenge of the colonial architecture of our heritage landscape. This includes the challenge of colonial statues and the memorialization of colonial and apartheid past. This continues to be a reflection of the heritage and public memory of the history of white people in our country. It must be noted that this extends beyond monuments and tangible traces of the country's past, which perpetually sought to undermine, deny, and oppress the intangible cultural heritage of Africans, which includes their cultures, languages, oral tradition, and their rituals. This is evident in the move that was undertaken by the apartheid government on the eve of the 1994 elections to protect some of the Afrikaner nationalist symbols by converting this into Section 21 companies and endowing them with immense funding. Ntlenjana, Webb, and Combs argue that, I quote, the post-apartheid state saw itself compelled to continue to fund these institutions to the detriment of investing in African majority heritage. It must be mentioned that our government has over the years invested exorbitant amount of resources from policies, legislation, public participation, heritage events, and the establishment of new commemorative markers and heritage institutions in an effort to transform the heritage landscape of our country. Sabina Marshall knows that, I quote, heritage has been widely understood as a symbolic plane upon which notions of identity are projected, but it is insufficiently acknowledged how these are underpinned by deep-seated emotions of fear, anger, or resentment motivated by everyday experiences and material conditions, concerns over livelihoods, and imaginings of the future. Recently, the Roads Must Fall campaign reignited the debate of the impact of our colonial history and colonial heritage on the larger debate on heritage transformation. The campaign largely centered on the Rhodes statue at UCT, reinvigorated the debate about the association of statues around the country. This debate on the meaning and the moralization of apartheid and colonial statues on present-day democratic South Africa needs to be explored. This must take into consideration the aspirations of the ANC's 1993 draft policy on arts, culture, and heritage for post-apartheid South Africa. Honorable members, South Africa continues to be a nation at work, and heritage remains important in our continued project of nation building and social cohesion. Thus, we must continue to mobilize society in its entirety to work together to build a caring and proud society which is proud of its heritage, which is based on shared values and principles. It therefore becomes important that we move together as a nation in the discourse and in the transformation of the heritage landscape. This process needs to be rooted in the people, and that means that we must learn from the participatory community-based approach transforming heritage that was used in the mid-90s. This process was anchored on community consultation, and it has been argued that this approach is officially valued. We should learn from Mali, for example, on how it approached the transformation of its heritage landscape. Living memorials have been used positively and in a unilateral manner. The erection of new memorials and statues in Mali are used to promote nation building and development. Culture has been the anchor and is used in the process of national construction. In a situation that is very reminiscent of our South Africa, Arnold, MJ, asserts that a primary target audience of this monument is Bamako young people. These people have no direct experience with the mid-century struggles for independence, nor do they share with their grandparents or their parents any memorials. Honorable members, as you might have heard, Honorable Van Dijk lamenting, the DA argues in Arts and Culture and Heritage Policy that it will ensure that heritage sites reflect their diversity and continue an open dialogue about our history heritage. However, this has not been the case for residents of the Griqua right here in Cape Town. These residents are fighting with the city of Cape Town and its building associates over the preservation of history and heritage of Griqua. This action is expressed. Thank you, Chair.
Maloko a tlhomphegego a re amogeleng tona ya dipapadi bokgabo le setšo go tla go fetola.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to members. I think this has been an important conversation which underlines the fact that we understand that we have a duty, all of us, to build, we have a duty to build a nation and move forward with parameters well understood. I'm not going to say anything from the member who was the first to respond. I'll come back to what she was trying to say. Honorable Madlingozi, issues he's raising are important. Actually, I want to add from what he's saying, the list of even women and royal leaders, the Queen Mandantises. So as we transform this heritage, we need to take them into cognizance. Queen Mtania, Queen Mojaji, Grotowa, Queen Nonesi, Sarah Barman, and many others. We need to start from the beginning to Chief David and Klaas Tierman, which the Chief Whip assisted to repatriate a few years ago here, Oshumato, Adam Gok, Domen, Makoma, Ingwega Kufodais, Makado, Gejwayo, and many others. Honorable Turner, the language is important. All the languages are important, all of them. And as a constitutional democracy, we are duty-bound to respect all the languages. That is why we had to change the Makanda National English Museum to make it the Amazwi National Literature Museum, because you can't have developed English only in the area of more than 80% people speaking Xhosa. So all languages are important. The honorable thing says that the removal of the statues when people are hungry. I want to remind the honorable member that humanity is not only fulfilled through bread. He should know this better, because Jesus said these words, that people do not live by bread alone, but by the mouth, the word of God. Now, on this one, here we're talking about the identity and the soul of the nation. And if you think this is not important, then there is something wrong in your understanding of how things happen. Honorable Imam, the points you are raising are very important, extremely important. The people you are referring to, the National Core Heritage Route with 50 notes has just been approved by the Cabinet as part of the resistance and throughout the country. You find the notes of Khoi and San people throughout the country. This month, Heritage Month, we have declared that Oma Katrina Esau, one of the few living teachers of the new and queer language. This one is dedicated to her and other living human treasures. So we take care and we understand what we are talking about, and we'll continue to do that because it's quite important. Honorable Member Menzo, I think all members are clear today. There is no national government which is going to come and change the name in your community. We have empowered communities to take decisions themselves. Ours is to, when you are fighting and come and appeal to us. But each and every community has capacity, has power to change things, whether it's names of places, whether it's statues and so on. We understand that that is what we have. So if you feel like in your township, you need to name the township with this leader, because the leaders you spoke about are the leaders of all of us in South Africa. They don't belong to PAC alone. They are the leaders of the liberation movement in this country. Now, honorable members, thank you very much for your contribution. And we hope that we are the ones who are going to be able to explain to people how do you go about changing the heritage landscape. It has to change. And it will change. But what we are not going to allow is that we're not going to allow to destroy others. We don't agree with the theme parks we are talking about. If you don't know the colonialist, Honorable Dana, we'll remind you. I mean, students just reminded you a few years ago about the Cecil Jones roads here is one of them. But there are many. If you want them, there is a list of those who can call them, but that's not an issue. The issue here is that even those who were protagonists of colonialism and apartheid, we are not going to confine them in the dustbin of history. We are going to have them in the theme parks so that people come and see, lest we forget. Thank you very much.
Sithokoze, Nyambozi. I will now allow the secretary to read the first order. Consideration of reports of Portfolio Committee on Transport on Road Accident Benefit Scheme Bill. Thank you very much. I will now recognize the Chief Whip of the Majority Party.
Thank you very much, House Chair. I move that